Today, I want to tell you about a problem that I'm sure many of you have experienced. You're trying to watch your favorite show, and it says, region restricted, or accessing a website. You're like, I want to read something, and it's like, it's not available. Or often it comes up, it's not available in the EU. And I'm like, why not? What did I do? But good news, there is a solution to that, and that would be today's fantastic sponsor, Surfshark. With Surfshark, you can protect all of your internet activity and stay private, and that's kind of, the normal thing about a VPN, but also you can access new content. I've got a story. A few years ago, I was in America, and I go onto Netflix, and I'm like, oh, brilliant, they have the whole of Mad Men on Netflix America. What's that? I download it all, thinking, big brain, I'm going to download it all and then watch it when I'm back home. And no, I get home and it's like region restricted, and this is just taking up a lot of space on your phone. But tell you what, fire up that Surfshark VPN and you'll be fine. With Surfshark, you can virtually travel the world in just one click. Just connect to a server in the country you want to visit, and voila! You can access all the content you want. Plus, if you're traveling, you can easily access and unblock streaming platforms and even change your virtual location to get access to content back home. When I'm traveling, I often just have the VPN set back home anyway, so I get my nice familiar ads and it makes me feel comfortable. Plus, there's Surfshark alerts so you can monitor your personal data, check for potential breaches, and get real-time alerts to protect your family. Plus, Surfshark Antivirus keeps your device virus-free, and Surfshark Search lets you browse without a trace. So if you want to protect yourself online and get access to content from anywhere in the world, go to surfshark.deals/ITS and use the promo code ITS to get 83% off and 3 extra months for free. And don't forget, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. And now today's video. Imagine a swarm of nanobots. They look just like mosquitoes, but they're carrying a designer pathogen. Their bite isn't a bite. It's an injection of a virus, and thanks to a little bit of gene splicing, all vaccines and treatments have been rendered useless. The nation that released the swarm has done so with no risk of the virus infecting their own population, as the insects are using AI to pick their targets, and the pathogen itself is only effective on a specific ethnic group. Could this happen tomorrow? Well, no, fortunately, nanotech and genetic engineering aren't there yet. Could this happen in 2035? Well, possibly. And it's a threat that's being taken very seriously by both the United States and Russia, who are taking steps to protect against their national DNA leaking out through at-home ancestry testing kits. Humans have been engaging in biological warfare that's using weapons to spread disease among people, plants, or animals for thousands of years. Early examples include tularemia patients being driven into enemy lands in 15,000 BC. Scythian archers in 4000 BC contaminating their arrows by sticking them in dead bodies before shooting, and Tartar forces catapulting plague-infected corpses into Kaffa in the 14th century. They had intended to kill with the stench alone, but of course it was the disease that did the job. With advancements in biotechnology come advancements in biowarfare, and soon aggressors could bypass messy methods involving cadavers or jars of live snakes and manufacture pathogens in the lab. But while less gross, we were still just flinging stuff that already occurred in nature at each other. Then we discovered DNA and its structure. Suddenly life itself was demystified and reduced to the simple building blocks of A, T, C, and G, and as soon as we knew what they were, we started messing around with them, and in 1972, biochemist Paul Berg became the first to successfully combine the DNA of 2 different organisms, a monkey virus and a lambda virus. In 1973, Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen inserted the DNA from one bacteria into another, and in 1974, Rudolf Janisch and Beatrice Mintz created the first genetically modified animal, a mouse whose embryo was injected with the DNA of the SV40 virus, which prevented the formation of liver and brain tumors. The discovery created an explosion of gene research, which led to bacteria able to produce human insulin, pest-resistant crops, and glowfish, the genetically engineered fluorescent fish you could keep as a pet if they're not prohibited in your country. Admittedly, some of these advancements were more useful than others. Unfortunately, as is human nature, while Mintz and Janisch were engineering their tumor-free mice, the Soviet Union was setting up Biopreparat, a biological warfare program aiming to devise a second generation of bioweapons enhanced by genetic modification. They worked on anthrax, plague, smallpox, tularemia, and Marburg, and their objectives included antibiotic-resistant, genetically combined superbugs, and viruses hidden inside bacteria that would act as a kind of Trojan horse and dual infection. Fortunately, despite years of research, multiple successful antibiotic and vaccine-resistant superbugs, and many other countries establishing their own bioweapons programs, the whole thing never really caught on, mostly due to cost, time, dodgy delivery methods, and a frightening lack of precision. Unfortunately, recent advances in biotech and genetic engineering are solving these problems and changing the landscape of biowarfare once again. The first problems to be solved were time and money. As after the research has been done once, it's terrifyingly easy to replicate. For example, in 2002, a team of researchers from the University of Wisconsin announced a terrifying breakthrough. They'd managed to alter the amino acid profile of the bird flu virus, allowing it to reproduce in mammal lungs and be transmitted by coughing and sneezing. Their intention had been to solve the riddle of how the virus could become airborne among humans, which they did achieve. But as they published their paper, they were met with horror rather than accolades. The New York Times described it as an engineered doomsday, and the White House announced that it would halt funding for this and any other project that could make viruses more lethal. Unfortunately, there's no way to turn back time and undo the work, though. As biotech expert Gaiman Bennett explains, it took specialized facilities and millions of dollars for the University of Wisconsin researchers to figure out how to create the amino acid sequence that would allow the virus to reproduce in mammal lungs. But once you published the sequence, once they've done that work, it would take a competent physician a few $1,000s and a few weeks to reproduce the result. End quote. This issue is made worse by technologies like the introduction of CRISPR in 2013. This incredible tech has made gene editing quicker, easier, and cheaper than ever before. It works by creating a synthetic strand of RNA matching the sequence of the target DNA in an organism's genome. This RNA strand is attached to an enzyme which can cut the DNA. Once cut, the DNA can be removed and new DNA added. In 2014, a scientist explained that CRISPR had affected both the cost and duration of gene editing dramatically, and what used to take $20,000 in 18 months had been reduced to $3,000 and 3 weeks. But that was 2014. Now it's possible to buy a mail-order DIY CRISPR kit like the one created by biohacker Josiah Zayner for just $130. For that, he sends customers everything they need to edit E. coli so that it would be resistant to the antibiotic streptomycin. Of course, he ensured it was a non-pathogenic form of E. coli, so as not to release a new super form on the world, except in Germany, where the Bavarian Health and Food Safety Authority found that the 2 kits they tested did contain the potentially pathogenic bacteria. And of course, it's all still available for sale. The biggest warfare threat to come out of CRISPR is known as designer genes. This is the classic process of inserting something like an antifreeze gene from a flounder in a tomato to make it frost-resistant. The most obvious application in warfare is to insert the gene for vaccine, antibiotic, or antiviral resistance into a pathogen to render the enemy defenseless. Of course, this is old news, as BioPrepRat were doing that for years. The difference now is that Soviet scientists only had access to a few complete genome sequences, so their menu of offensive genes was relatively limited. Today, with new technologies and whole genome sequencing, there are more than 200,000 bacteria and 4,000 viruses fully sequenced, and they're easily available online. This essentially provides a blueprint for any trait scientists would like their pathogen to have. But it gets worse. In 2002, Eckhard Wimmer, working at the State University of New York, got the blueprint for polio, obtained some mail-order DNA, and in just 2 years managed to assemble the virus from scratch. In tests, it killed mice just as quickly as the original. This is a virus that has been eradicated in the US and in all other countries except 2. Now imagine someone wanted to do the same with smallpox, a disease so deadly it's only held at 2 facilities, one in the US and one in Russia. Theoretically, with just the genome sequence, they could create it from scratch with no need to gain access to either facility, and they could add in resistance to our current vaccines for good measure. Unfortunately, there is one stumbling block. While polio only has 7,741 bases, smallpox has 185,000, making it much too complex for current methods. For now. Another application of genetic modification in warfare are binary biological weapons. As the name suggests, these contain two compounds, both fairly innocuous, or at least not fatal on their own. But combined, they become much more deadly. In genetically modified binary weapons, these two components are often a host bacteria and a virulent plasmid, a small extrachromosomal DNA fragment that codes for virulence or another pathogenic function. On its own, the host bacteria wouldn't be harmful, but once the plasmid was inserted, which could take place during the flight of a missile, it would turn back into a deadly pathogen. This overcomes the massive obstacle of bioweapons that has put nations off developing their own programs. You see, the trouble with traditional bioweapons is that the tiny pathogens are notoriously difficult to contain, and a leak can be devastating to the producer's own population. Seeing as experts are still battling over whether or not this is what happened with COVID-19, instead, I'll give a biopreparat example. In 1979, a technician removed a blocked filter, which led to a production facility blasting a nearby ceramics plant with a huge cloud of anthrax. 105 of their own citizens were killed, along with 100 stray dogs who were used as scapegoats. Various defense agencies are also concerned about stealth viruses. These are viral infections that can be introduced into a human body using a vector. Once inside, the virus can lay dormant until a trigger mechanism is activated, and suddenly the effects are felt. This could be anything from the flu to a cancer-causing virus that triggers the growth of tumors. It sounds far-fetched, but there are already examples found in nature like herpes and shingles. The benefit of this type of attack over past weapons is twofold. Firstly, it dramatically increases the odds of the perpetrator remaining anonymous. This is essential to reduce the risk of sanctions or counterattacks. Secondly, if the attempt at stealth fails, the aggressor will be able to use the threat of activation of the virus as blackmail. Governments could be put in a position where they give in to the demands of their blackmailer or face hundreds or thousands of their citizens developing cancer at the touch of a button. Another area of concern are host-swapping diseases. The vast majority of viruses exist in their hosts, causing little to no damage. For example, bats act as unharmed reservoirs for Ebola, waterfowl for eastern equine encephalitis, and rodents harbor the hantavirus. However, occasionally, these viruses can make the jump from their host species to another, which can render them much more virulent and deadly. An example would be HIV jumping from chimpanzees to humans, causing AIDS. In past bioweapons programs, there were only a limited number of zoonotics available to choose from, and not all would be immediately effective on the battlefield. HIV, for example, would take years to have any significant effect. Today, though, advances in biotech mean that scientists can have their pick. They can select any animal-based virus and genetically modify it to infect humans. Gene therapy is possibly one of the greatest advancements in our quest to rid the world of genetic diseases or even unwanted genetic traits. So far, researchers have reactivated hair cells, cured deafness, and are working on a cure for diabetes by splicing an insulin-producing gene into pancreatic tissue. However, authorities have raised concerns that gene therapy could be applied as a weapon. Just as scientists can insert helpful genes, they can also insert harmful ones that could cause cell death, infertility, or really anything you can imagine. And terrifyingly, in the case of germline therapy, it can be designed to pass on to all future generations. This is, however, one of the least likely to be used in biowarfare. Firstly, because you'd have to physically treat your targets, and secondly, because it's such a slow burn. However, that doesn't mean it's useless. For a group attempting individual assassination, it wouldn't be impossible to apply the therapy covertly as part of some other treatment regime. For a targeted attack, though, defense agencies are much more concerned about designer diseases. Now, we're not there yet, but scientists are almost at a point where they will be able to design and create a brand new disease from scratch, reverse engineering it based on the properties, traits, and method of harm that they want it to have. Theoretically, it would be possible to create a pathogen that could produce a lethal toxin, attack the central nervous system, or trigger instant cell death. And even more disturbingly, these designer diseases could be made to target specific individuals or, horrifyingly, entire ethnic groups, effectively creating a racist bomb. This would remove another of the major barriers to genetically modified war: the lack of precision. As has been demonstrated by COVID, the amount of travel in today's society means that releasing an aggressive virus in one country does not guarantee that it'll stay there. This could mean accidentally infecting a friendly nation, or worse, the attacker's own civilians. With a genetically targeted bioweapon, though, the issue's resolved. The idea is they could even be engineered to be transmitted harmlessly throughout the population until reaching the target and becoming active. This means civilians could be used to carry the disease across borders, completely evading airport security. A popular hypothetical scenario is that the virus could be used to attack just one person based on their genetics, a foreign leader, for example. The DNA could be easily obtained at any drinks or dinner event, and then all a would-be assassin would have to do is sit back and wait as the infection spreads until eventually coming into contact with the target. By this point, tracing the source would be near impossible, and sanctions would be extremely unlikely. The good news is that we don't yet have this capability. The bad news is that in May 2007, the Russian government banned all exports of biological samples, apparently due to reports that Western institutions were developing genetic bioweapons designed to target the Russian population. Then in 2019, the US Department of Defense advised all military personnel against using at-home genetic test kits due to unforeseen security consequences. So clearly, neither nation is ruling out future genetically targeted weapons. So what stands between us and a genetically modified World War III? Well, not a huge amount, unfortunately. We do have some regulations in place in the form of the Cold War-era Biological Weapons Convention, which has been signed by 175 countries, prohibiting their development of bioweapons. But unlike nuclear facilities, bioengineering facilities aren't easy to spot, and any offensive work can easily be concealed. We're also lacking the mutually assured destruction of a nuclear war, as it's so much easier to conceal the source of a bioweapon attack. So, what's left to protect us against a super plague? Well, the main issues are delivery and precision. The easiest bioweapon delivery method is to aerosolize the germs and disperse them over a military target or city. Clearly, though, there are a few problems with this. The first is that once aerosolized, toxicity tends to drop, requiring targets to breathe in large quantities, which is difficult when they're so dispersed. The second issue is that the aggressors are at the mercy of the weather and wind. A sudden rainstorm and the toxin will be harmlessly washed away. A change in wind direction and it may not reach the target, or worse, it could be blown back onto friendly forces. An example of this happened in 1993 in an attempted bioterrorism attack in Tokyo by the religious cult Aum Shinrikyo. Twice, they attempted to disperse anthrax across the city, but one attack was thwarted by sunlight, which degraded it, and the other by rain, which washed it away. Residents reported foul odors, nausea, and vomiting, but were otherwise unscathed. Another delivery method is to load the pathogens into explosives like bombs, missiles, and artillery. Of course, this is also fairly ineffective, as the blast will damage the bacterial or viral agents. Unfortunately, delivery is a problem we might soon be able to overcome, though. In fact, the first solution has already been developed by the US. It's called the Insect Allies Program, and it was set up by DARPA with admirable intentions. The idea was to load insects with viruses that would deliver protective genes to the plants they landed on, thus guarding food supplies against disease. Unfortunately, it's not a huge leap to load those same insects up with destructive viruses that could wipe out a nation's food supply instead. This has led to accusations against DARPA, claiming they're trying to create a bioweapon, or at the very least, their actions could inspire an aggressive nation to do so. The problem is that now Pandora's box has been opened, the insects can't be put back in, and no one really knows what to do about it. Fortunately, though, this delivery technique still lacks precision and has the potential to harm the attacker. However, scientists now think that both problems could be overcome by combining genetically altered pathogens with nanotechnology. This is something that a group of experts advising NATO has identified as a potentially disruptive development that could transform the technological battlefield. In theory, it won't be long before insects, like nanobots, will be advanced enough to carry small amounts of ricin or another lethal factor and inject them into humans. Nanocarriers and capsules could also be used to transport the smallest toxins through impermeable cell membranes and across the blood-brain barrier. Decades ago, bacteriologist Theodore Rosebery predicted if World War III is allowed to come, biologists and men of all related fields, including physicians, will be called upon as never before to serve alongside physicists and other scientists as instruments of human destruction. Frighteningly, he just might have been right.